For Chapter 6, we're going to actually start off with 6.4. In your book, it's actually 6.1, but on the slides, it's 6.4. But everything else is the same. So we're going to start off with percents. To successfully complete this section, you'll need to understand writing decimals as fractions, writing fractions as decimals, multiplying decimals by powers of 10, and ratios. A percent is a ratio in which the denominator is 100. So if we have 100 boxes here and we have exactly 7 of them, we're talking about 7 100ths. And if we were to write that as a percent, we would say it is 7%. So when we're talking about percents, we're talking about the ratio of what we're talking about to 100. If we were to write each of these percents as a fraction, 27% would be 27 over 100, and then we could simplify some of these, but this one we cannot. 55% would be 55 divided by 100, and we can definitely pull a 5 out of both of those, and we get 11 over 20. 8.5% we could write as 8.5 over 100, but typically we don't write decimals in fractions. The way to remove the decimal is to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 10, and we get 85 over 1,000. After we've removed the decimal, we can simplify it, and we do that by pulling out a 5. Now, 350% looks a little bit different, but we set it up exactly the same way. 350 over 100, and then we can simplify from there. In this, we can pull out a 10, and then after that, we can pull out a 5. We get 7 over 2. When a fraction has a denominator of 100, the numerator is the percentage, and the fraction can be easily written as a percent. So if we have fractions that look like these, something over 100, it is immediately convertible to percents. So 3 over 100 is 3%. 25 over 100 is 25%. 7.5 over 100 is 7.5%. Okay, if the percent is a whole number, the percent can be written as a fraction, then as a decimal. So what we can do is, if we have 36%, we can write it as a fraction first, 36 over 100, and then we could write it as a decimal, which would be 0.36. This one's already finished, but we're going to go ahead and, if we have the percent, 4%, we could write it as a fraction first, 4 over 100, and 4 over 100 is 0.04. 250%, we could write as a fraction first, it's 250 over 100, and then we can write it as a decimal, and it's 2.5. If the percent has a decimal in it, we multiply the numerator and denominator by the same power of 10 to make the numerator into a whole number. In these examples, in the first one, 3.8%, what we need to do is we can write it as a fraction, and then after we write it as a fraction, the fraction will have a decimal in it, so we need to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 10. That will remove this decimal here. It will increase this to 1,000, but it'll make it so we have a fraction without a decimal in it. We get 38 over 1,000, and then we need to go ahead and do that division and it is simply 0.038. Forty-five 0.82%, we need to multiply top and bottom, or numerator and denominator, by 100, and we get 4,582 divided by 10,000. And that's simply 0.4582. Okay, so a procedure for writing percents as decimals. This is just a rough way to do it. It's not exactly mathematically correct, but it's just like the thought process for switching from percents to decimals. So first we can pop in a decimal point after all of the whole numbers if our percent doesn't have a decimal in it already. If it has a decimal in it, you leave it there. The next thing you do is you add in any zeros to fill out your whole numbers. Basically, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be moving this decimal place 2 places to the left, so you just write in those zeros. And then you go ahead and move those decimal places 2 places to the left and drop the percentage sign. So this is how it's explained in the book. The way I typically think about it is somewhere maybe skipping this middle step. If you have 7% and you want to go to decimal, all you need to do is understand that 7% is divided by 100. So if we want to write that, we're going to move this decimal place 2 spots to the left, and that's what we did here. We moved it 2 spots to the left. It's really all you have to do with this, changing percents to decimals. So if we wanted to write each of these percents as decimals, in the first one, there is an understood decimal point right here, as is after all whole numbers, and all we need to do is move the decimal 2 places to the left. So we get 0.73. In 135%, we get 1.35%, and in 15.8%, we get 0.158. Okay, here are some problems you can work on. They won't take any time at all, and after you have done them, you can go ahead and look at the solutions.
Okay, in the first few problems, we need to write these percents as decimal, and the easiest way that I know to do this is just to put in a decimal here, and then move it up to and drop the percent sign. So this is 0.16%. If the decimal was here, then we move it up. We get 1.84. Move it up 2, we get 0.172. And here, we already have the decimal point, so we need to move it up 2, so it'd be 1, 2. So we get 0.005. And that's writing these percents as decimals.
Now, if we're able to write percents as decimals, then obviously we can write decimals as percent. If a decimal number has 2 decimal places, it can be written first as a fraction with a denominator of 100, then as a percent. If the number has fewer than 2 decimal places, we can place 1 or 2 ending zeros so it has 2 decimal places. So what does that say? If we wanted to write each one of these as a percent, we can first change them into the fraction that they represent. 52 over 100, and that is directly translatable into percents as 52%. If we have 0 0.08, that would be 8 over 100, directly translatable into percents. Another way to think about it is you can take a decimal and multiply by 100 and a percent sign to get a decimal to change into a percent. So if we multiplied this by 100, we'd get 81, and if we multiplied it by 100 and a percent sign, we get 81%. If we multiplied 1.66 times 100 and a percent sign, then we would get 166%. If we multiply 0.7 by 100, we would get 70%. And if we multiplied 4 times 100%, we would get 400%. Okay, here are some problems that you can work on, and after you're done working on them by yourself, then go ahead and look at my solutions.
Okay, in these problems, we're switching from decimal to percent, and the way we do that is we basically multiply each number by 100 and add a percent sign. So when we multiply 0.78 by 100, we would get 78. We add in that percent sign. When we multiply 0.9 by 100, we get 90, and we add in that percent sign. When we multiply 1.64 by 100, we get 164, add in the percent sign. And when we multiply 0.062 by 100, we get 6.2%.
A fraction with a denominator of 100 can be immediately written as a percent. If the denominator is not 100, then we can convert the fraction into a percent by first writing the fraction as a decimal. Once the fraction is in decimal form, we can multiply it by 100 to find the percent equivalent. So if we wanted to write each one of these fractions as a percent, well, the first one can actually be simplified as 1 over 10, but we can just do it by dividing. 1 over 10 is 0.1, and 0.1 we can easily change into a percent by multiplying by 100%, or understanding that we have to move the decimal place back to and add a percent sign. So what we end up getting is 10%. 8/25, once we do that division, we're going to have to do it long division. We get 0.32, and that we can write as a percent very easily by moving the decimal place back to and adding the percent sign. Here are some percentage equivalents to some fractions. Half is 50%. 1/3 is 33 and a third percent, or 33.333333 to infinity percent. 2/3 is 66 and 2/3 percent, or 66.6666 to infinity. 1/4 is 25%. 3/4 is 75%. And you can go over the rest of the chart yourself. Here are some problems that you can work on converting some fractions to percents.
In these problems, we are changing from a fraction to a percent, and to do that, we first need to write it as a decimal. The way we write this fraction as a decimal is we go ahead and do the long division that is associated with it. 5 doesn't go into 2, so we need to start off with a decimal right away. When we put in the decimal, we can add as many zeros as we want until we get a repeating pattern or we get a remainder of 0. So when we do that, we can see that we're going to get 4, and we get a remainder of 0 right away. So if we want to write this or this fraction as a percent, we first switch it into a decimal, which is what we just did, and then after that we switch it to a percent. So I'm going to go ahead and write it here as 40%. Okay, 5/4, that's more than one whole, but I'm going to go ahead and do the associated long division. So how many times does 4 go into 5? Well, it goes 1 off the bat, and we get a remainder of 1. We're going to have to go ahead and pop in a decimal here. When we pop in a decimal here, we're going to have to put it in here as well. So when we bring down the 0, we get a 2. 2 times 4 is 8. We get a remainder of 2. We're going to put in another 0 here, and we're going to get 20 down here. Well, that's going to be 5, and 5 times 4 is 20, remainder 0. So here is our decimal equivalent, and we need to change this into a percent. So when we do it, we multiply this times 100, so we get 125, and don't forget to add in the percent sign. All right, the last one is 7/9. To write this as a percent, we first need to do the associated division. So how many times does 9 go into 7? Well, none straight away. We need to add in that decimal. We add in the decimal in the bottom. We need to make sure we add it in the top. How many times does 9 go into 70? Well, 9 times 7 is 63. All right, and we get a remainder of 7. Well, if we put in another 0, we get 70 down here again, and we would put 7 up here, so we get 63 again, remainder of 7. Another 0. I think we can all see the pattern that is developing. 63 again with a remainder of 0. So this is just going to continue being 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. In the instructions, it says round each percentage to the nearest tenth. So we would need to write to the nearest hundredth for the decimal to round it off. So this gets rounded up to 8. So if we want to round it off, we have 0.778. And when we multiply that times 100, we get that it's 77.8%.